My name is Kate, and I'm 30 years old. My life now is built, outwardly, along the strict, logical lines of code and the transparent horizons of Oregon, where I work as a software developer. But the foundation of this seemingly solid reality rests on the shaky ground of childhood and youth, which casts a long, cold shadow. This shadow was cast by the immovable figure of my older brother, Henry. He is 32, and from the very day I was born, he was the golden child, the favorite, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. Let me give you a few examples. For the devil, as they say, is in the details, and the pain is in the little things. In childhood, Henry's birthdays were not just marks on the calendar, but real events, carefully staged performances where he played the lead role. I'm talking about professional animators dressed as superheroes, buffets from catering companies groaning with canapes, and balloons, garlands, and posters that turned our living room into a semblance of an amusement park. Children from his entire class came, a noisy, cheerful crowd, and my parents, beaming with pride, spent hundreds of dollars to give him the best day of his life. My own birthdays took place in a different, much more muted reality. Every year, instead of a birthday cake, a slightly stale, store-bought, semi-finished product from the nearest supermarket was placed on the table, accompanied by pizza from a local diner. No parties, no friends, just the four of us sitting at the kitchen table while my parents talked about rising prices and how expensive everything was. Their sighs were the only songs on my holiday. At Christmas, the story repeated itself with striking, hurtful consistency. The morning for Henry was magical. Under the twinkling lights of the tree, he would find the latest gaming consoles, bicycles with shiny chrome, expensive gadgets that had just hit the market. I still remember one year when he got a gaming system whose price, I'm sure, was over $1,000. And what did I find? Pragmatic, utterly magic-free school supplies. Notebooks, pens, folders. Or clothes from second-hand stores, which sometimes still had price tags ruthlessly showing that each item cost less than $10. You needed it anyway, my mom would say, and we want you to focus on your education, not on trifles. I told myself it didn't matter. The caring about gifts was childish and petty. But of course it wasn't about the gifts themselves, but what they represented, the unconditional love poured out on him, and the conditional, economical affection allotted to me. Then came college. Henry applied with great fanfare to the University of Southern California, a large, prestigious, and incredibly expensive out-of-state school. My parents, without batting an eye, paid for everything: the exorbitant tuition, campus housing, meals, membership fees, books, and a generous allowance. He lived away from home, had his own car, and never once thought about bills. When my turn came 2 years later to enroll at the University of Oregon, I, driven by years of ingrained frugality, decided to live at home to save money. It seemed reasonable and practical to me. Why pay for a dorm when I could stay in my old room? However, my parents had other ideas. "You're 18 now," my mom stated without a hint of doubt. "You're an adult. We have to teach you independence." They presented me with a bill for $500 a month. Rent and utilities is what they called the right to sleep within the walls where my entire childhood had passed. I had to get a job at a bookstore for $8.50 an hour. It was catastrophically insufficient, and I, gritting my teeth, found a second job at a coffee shop near home. I bought used textbooks, old editions that sometimes had entire pages missing, and forced myself to ignore the sneers of my classmates. My main diet for lunch and dinner became peanut butter sandwiches. They were cheap and kept me full for a long time. And every month, after enduring endless shifts, I would set aside those $500 and give them to my parents. And every single month, I became a mute witness to how they would immediately spend that money, and often much larger sums, on packages for Henry. He would call home and complain that the food in the university cafeteria wasn't good enough for his refined taste. And soon, a box would be on its way to him, stuffed with his favorite snacks and $100 gift cards to local restaurants. I said nothing. There were no words capable of expressing the chasm that lay between us. I just, gritting my teeth, worked harder. After graduating from university, I started my career as a developer. It was an entry-level position with a more than modest salary, but I clung to it as the only chance to build my own life. I immersed myself in work, stayed late at the office, mastered new technologies, and took on any task, even the most routine, just to prove my worth. My home was a tiny studio apartment that smelled of dust and other people's lives, and my constant dinner was instant noodles, whose price was the only thing that matched my budget. Meanwhile, Henry, who had graduated with a degree in communications 2 years earlier, returned under our parents' roof. For the next 3 years, he lived in his old room, immersed in video games and grand tales of entrepreneurial projects that were born in his head and just as tracelessly vanished, never making it into reality. My parents didn't just support him. They created an endless and comfortable little world for him, where the concept of rent didn't exist, where the refrigerator was always full, and the future was seen as just a series of brilliant but unrealized opportunities. When he finally got a job at a marketing firm, the event was celebrated with such pomp as if he had closed a multi-million-dollar deal. My parents threw a party at an expensive restaurant with heavy tablecloths, steaks that melted in your mouth, and aged wine. They raised glasses to his success. Their eyes shone with genuine pride, and their toasts were a hymn to his long-awaited, as they thought, triumph. After 2 years of hard work, sleepless nights, and projects that others had refused, I was promoted to senior developer. For me, it was not just a change in the staffing schedule, but a recognition of my professional competence, a huge step confirming that all my sacrifices were not in vain. To mark the occasion, my parents took me to an inexpensive cafe with a plastic menu and tabletops sticky from previous patrons. And the whole evening, while I tried to swallow the tasteless pasta, their conversation revolved around Henry, his job, his new girlfriend, his plans for the future. When I timidly tried to mention my promotion, my mom just nodded, distractedly throwing out, "That's great, dear," and immediately, without catching her breath, asked, "Did I tell you that Henry might get a promotion soon?" I didn't say another word, burying myself in my plate. Then Henry married Madison, a pretty and charming girl whose work history was a series of short-lived enthusiasms, none of which lasted longer than 6 months. My parents were delighted with her. They paid for everything: the luxurious venue for the ceremony, the exquisite catering, mountains of flowers, the $1,000 wedding dress. And afterwards, they helped the young couple buy an apartment, contributing a significant part of the down payment and co-signing the mortgage loan, which Henry and Madison were unlikely to have been approved for on their own. By that time, I had been living an ascetic life for years, saving every extra cent, investing in my future, and carefully building my credit history. I had accumulated a decent down payment for my own home, but no one in the family even asked if I needed help. I didn't ask, for I had known the answer since childhood with a bitter, piercing clarity. Henry and Madison had 3 children, one after another. First Ethan, now 5, then Olivia, 3 years old, and finally baby Liam, who is just 1 year old. My parents became the most dedicated grandparents in the world, their house filled with expensive, noisy toys that I could only dream of as a child. Savings accounts for future education were opened for each grandchild. They constantly babysat the children, were always on call, always at the center of their lives. I began to avoid family events, Sunday dinners, holidays. It was unbearably painful to watch this idyll. Every event was similar to the previous one. My parents fussed over Henry and his family, and I remained in the corner, a mute and invisible ghost. All these years, I continued to save, living with one single, hard-won goal: to buy my own house, a place that would belong solely to me. I didn't share my plans with anyone in the family. I knew exactly what their reaction would be as soon as I spoke of my intention. They would unanimously try to convince me that a house was an unaffordable luxury and a meaningless waste of money for a single person. They would immediately suggest directing my savings towards Henry's family needs, helping him and Madison buy a more spacious home since they had growing children. But I wasn't going to give up my dream. I gritted my teeth and continued to methodically save every bill, maintaining silence like a secret conspirator. And then Jennifer, my work colleague, inadvertently shattered all my plans for secrecy. I had completely forgotten that she maintained a friendly relationship with Madison. One evening, after completing a particularly difficult project, we stayed late for a glass of wine. A few sips of the intoxicating drink loosened my tongue, and I, in the euphoria of the milestone reached, let it slip that I was house hunting. The next week I got a call from my mother. "Kate, Madison told me you're buying a house," her voice sounded, promising nothing good. "We need to have a serious discussion about this. You'll need at least 5 bedrooms, and it should be located near Henry's house so the children can visit you as often as possible. You'll be able to spend more time with them." My heart sank. I had so dreamed of realizing my plan on my own terms, without their intrusive involvement. "I'm still just looking, Mom," I tried to deflect. "I'll let you know when I find something." But it was too late. The irreparable had happened. The very next day, my mother and Madison launched a real bombardment of real estate listings. These were huge mansions with 5 or 6 bedrooms, estates with pools and guest apartments, whose cost was twice my modest savings. "Look at this one," Madison wrote. "Perfect for family gatherings. The kids will love the pool." Mom sent a listing from the Tigard area. Just 5 minutes from Henry, you could see the grandchildren every day. I ignored every message. Didn't respond. Didn't engage in discussions. Instead, I found my house, a cozy Cape Cod-style cottage in Beaverton with 3 bedrooms. It was exactly what I had always dreamed of. Authentic wooden floors, famous for their creaking in the most charming places. Wooden siding gave the building a unique charm. 2 fireplaces, in the living room and the master bedroom, promised warmth and coziness on long evenings. And the small balcony on the second floor, accessible from the bedroom, seemed created for sitting there with a book in hand. For me, it was perfection, but not for them. I made an offer, negotiated, and closed the deal. The house became mine. I decided to announce it to the family only when all the formalities were settled and they could no longer change anything. Sunday dinner at my parents' house. I drove there, bracing for the impending storm. Everyone was gathered. Mom, Dad, Henry, Madison, and their 3 restless offspring, filling the space with loud shouts and stomping. Ethan chased Olivia around the living room, while baby Liam banged a spoon on his high-chair tray. We had barely sat down at the table when a radiant smile bloomed on my mother's face. "Kate, we have wonderful news for you," she announced triumphantly. "We found the perfect house for you." I slowly put down my fork. "What?" I squeezed out. "It's in the Tigard area, just 5 minutes from Henry and Madison. 5 bedrooms, a huge backyard where the kids can play, and a basement that Henry can set up as a home office when he's visiting you." Madison immediately picked up with delight. "It's perfect. We can stay with you on weekends, and in the summer maybe for longer. We have 3 children, and it's getting a bit cramped in our house." Henry nodded in agreement. "Yes, the basement is a great idea. I just need a quiet place to work on some projects." I sat as if paralyzed, listening to them with unshakable confidence, describing my life in a house I hadn't even considered. Without a shadow of a doubt, they had chosen everything for me. The neighborhood, the square footage, the purpose of the rooms, building castles in the air with my savings, without even deigning to ask me a simple question. "I've already bought a house," my words sounded in the ensuing silence. An absolute, tomb-like silence. Even the children seemed to freeze for a moment. My mother's face turned as white as chalk. "What?" she gasped. "I bought a house, with 3 bedrooms, in Beaverton. The deal closed last week." Henry leaned forward sharply. 3 bedrooms? That's it? Where are we supposed to stay when we come to visit?" "You won't be staying with me," my answer cut through the silence. "This is my house. For me." The explosion was immediate. My father slammed his fist on the table with such force that the dishes rattled. "Selfish, ungrateful girl," he roared. My mother burst into hysterical screams. "I raised you better. How could you do this to your own family?" Madison immediately started crying. "Think of the children. They need space, and you're so cruel." Henry, pointing his finger at me, growled, "Fool and selfish. We are your family, and family should help each other." I stood up, and the screech of the chair on the floor sounded like a final chord. "Family helps?" My voice trembled, but inside, everything had frozen. "Which one of you ever helped me? I've been living on my own since I was 18. You charged me rent while Henry lived here for free. You paid for his wedding while I ate instant noodles. Don't you dare talk to me about family." I grabbed my jacket and walked out, slamming the door, leaving behind my mother's lamentations and my father's angry shouts accusing me of madness. The pursuit began the very next day. Madison bombarded me with photos of the children sleeping in bunk beds, with captions, "Our little ones are so cramped. 3 children in one tiny room." My mother left 20 missed calls. I didn't answer. All the voicemails were the same. Accusations, guilt trips, tears. She insisted I was acting recklessly and destroying the family. Henry texted, "Mom can't sleep because of you. She's just sick with worry. Are you happy now?" I didn't react to anything. Then they took our conflict to social media. My mother wrote lengthy posts about the importance of family loyalty. Madison shared articles about selfish relatives abandoning their families. They didn't name me, but everyone understood. Relatives got involved. Calls started pouring in from aunts, uncles, cousins, people who didn't know the whole story, who had only heard my family's distorted version. "Kate, family is the most important thing. You should help your brother. Your mother is in despair. How can you be so callous? Those children need you. You're their aunt." I stopped answering calls altogether. And then Aunt Teresa appeared on the doorstep of my new house. She stood on the porch, clutching a Bible, her face fixed in that self-satisfied expression I had known since childhood. "Kate, we need to talk about your behavior," she began. "The Bible says, 'Honor your father and your mother. Loyalty to family is sacred.'" I interrupted her, and my voice was cold and firm. "And did my parents tell you that they charged me rent while Henry lived at home for free for 3 years? Did they mention that they paid for his entire college education while I worked 2 jobs? Did Madison tell you that she wants to use my house as a free hotel? It doesn't matter. Family? Please leave my property. Now." And I closed the door right in her face. Through the window, I watched her stand there, her posture expressing mute bewilderment and offended righteousness. For a whole minute, she stood as if waiting for me to change my mind and fling the door open, before turning around and slowly, with dignity, walking to her car. The messages kept coming, becoming more sophisticated. A wave of guilt, a hail of accusations, a barrage of demands. Every day brought something new. At some point, a cold analytical mode switched on inside me. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of conversations, photos of call logs with dozens of missed calls, detailed notes on every contact. Deep down, an intuitive foreboding grew that this meticulously collected chronicle might someday be needed. A few weeks of relative calm passed. I began to hope they would leave me alone, that my firm decision had finally been accepted by them. But I was cruelly mistaken. They hadn't given up. They were just plotting their next move. It was a Saturday morning, clear and sunny. I was enjoying the quiet in my garden, planting flowers I had bought at the nursery. Bright marigolds, delicate petunias, clumps of fragrant herbs. The warm earth felt pleasantly cool on my fingers, and for the first time in a long while, I began to feel calm within the walls of my new home. Suddenly, this peace was shattered by the sound of an approaching car. I looked up and saw Henry's familiar SUV slowing down near my house. The doors flew open, and out poured Henry, Madison, and all 3 children. They were laden with bags, suitcases, backpacks, and even carried a small cooler. Henry walked towards me with an unnaturally wide, forced smile. "Hey, sis," he said, as if nothing had happened between us. "We're staying with you for the weekend." Madison, without wasting a second, was already herding the children towards the house. "We're just starving," she declared. "Make us breakfast. The kids love pancakes." The children, like little barbarians, scattered across my yard. Ethan and Olivia ran across the newly planted flower beds, their feet mercilessly trampling the tender seedlings. Liam, toddling, tried to follow them, tripped, and fell face first into the mud, letting out an ear-splitting roar. "Control your children," I said, and my voice sounded cold and detached. "And you need to leave. You can't just show up here uninvited." Henry just laughed, waving me off. "Oh, come on, Kate. We're family. This is what families do." Madison picked up Liam, who was covered head to toe in mud, and continued to wail. "You're just heartless," she sobbed. "These are innocent children. How can you throw out your own niece and nephews?" I looked past her, towards the house. Through the window, I could clearly see Ethan and Olivia, who had somehow gotten inside, jumping on my sofa. Their shoes were muddy, their hands dirty. As I watched, Ethan grabbed a vase from the coffee table and dropped it with a crash onto the floor. Shards flew everywhere. "That was Grandma's vase," I said, and a lump rose in my throat. Madison didn't even glance. "Kids always break things," she dismissed. "It's normal." "Get out, all of you, immediately." Henry took a step towards me, his face contorted. "Are you really going to throw 3 small children out onto the street? What kind of person are you?" "I'm the kind of person who demands respect for my property. Look at what they're doing to my house." Madison burst into tears. The tears were fake, theatrical, the kind she could turn on and off at will. "I can't believe you're treating us like this. We came all this way. The children were so excited to see their aunt, and you're just throwing us out?" "You brought this on yourselves. I didn't invite you."
Henry grabbed their bags forcefully. "Fine, we're leaving, but you'll regret this, Kate," he hissed. "Family doesn't forget this." They got into the SUV and drove away.
The next hour I spent scrubbing dirty marks off the sofa upholstery, vacuuming up the glass shards, and painfully replanting the flowers that had survived their invasion. A few weeks later, my mom showed up on my doorstep. In her hands glowed a blueberry pie, exactly like the one she used to bake in my distant, cloudless childhood. "Kate, can we talk?" she said quietly. I froze in the doorway, not moving, feeling a cold knot tighten in my chest. "I brought a pie, your favorite. I wanted to apologize. We were wrong to pressure you. It's your house, your decision."
She looked sincere, tired, but sincere. "May I come in? Maybe show me the house? You worked so hard for it. I'd like to see what you've made of it." Against the voice of sober reason, I let her in. She slowly walked through every room, lavishly praising the refinished floors, the cozy fireplaces, the abundance of natural light. Her admiration seemed genuine. "You've done well, Kate," she said as she left. "It's a beautiful house." We drank coffee with that very pie. She asked about my work, my life, the most mundane things. Not a single word about Henry or the children. No attempts to ask for anything. Just a mother talking to a daughter. As she was leaving, she hugged me. "I'm proud of you." I desperately wanted to believe it. Truly. 5 days later, I went grocery shopping. A perfectly ordinary Saturday, nothing remarkable. I was gone for maybe 2 hours. But when I drove up to the house, Henry's SUV was parked at the entrance again. I felt a chill inside. I approached the front door. It was locked, but noise was coming from inside. Children's screams, the sound of furniture being moved. I opened the door. Henry and Madison were in the living room, open suitcases lying everywhere. Madison was hanging her clothes in my closet. The children were running around the house as if they owned the place. "What the hell are you doing here?" burst out of me. Henry looked up at me lazily. "Oh, hey, we decided to move in while you were out. Thought it would be easier." I looked at the door. There were no signs of a break-in. The lock was intact. "How did you get keys to my house?" Henry smirked. "Mom made impressions of your keys when she visited. We made copies." The blood froze in my veins. The visit, the pie, the apologies. It was all a carefully planned performance. She had come to steal my keys, make impressions of them, and give them to Henry. "Get out of my house, now." Madison stopped hanging clothes. "Kate, be reasonable. We need space. Your house has 3 bedrooms. That's enough for everyone." "This is my house." My voice shook with rage. "I bought it with my own money. You have no right to be here." Henry crossed his arms over his chest. "Family matters. This is what families do." I took out my phone and dialed the police. "What are you doing?" asked Henry. "Calling the police. You have broken into my house. We have keys. Keys you made without my permission from stolen impressions. That's still breaking and entering." Madison burst into theatrical tears again. "You're calling the police? On children? How can you?" I ignored her. The female dispatcher answered, and I clearly explained the situation. Unauthorized people were in my house without permission, and I needed them removed. The police arrived in about 15 minutes. 2 officers, both with professional and serious faces. "Ma'am, are you the owner of this house?" one of them addressed me. "Yes," I replied, feeling the trembling in my knees being replaced by firm confidence. "I have documents with me confirming ownership." The officers turned to Henry, and their stances became stiffer. "Sir, do you have permission to be in this house?" asked the older one, his voice even and devoid of emotion. "She's my sister. We're family," Henry tried to parry, spreading his hands. "I'm not asking about relations. Do you have direct permission from the property owner to be here?" the officer insisted. "Well, no, but—" Henry began, but the policeman gently but firmly interrupted him. "Then you need to vacate the premises immediately. You are trespassing on private property." Madison, who had been watching from the side, rushed forward, her voice trembling with indignation. "But we have keys. We didn't break in." The policeman shook his head, his expression unchanged.
Having keys obtained by deception does not give you the legal right to occupy someone else's property against the owner's will. You need to gather your belongings and leave right now, otherwise we will have to proceed with a formal eviction.
They had to comply. They started throwing their belongings into suitcases, and the whole time their gazes, full of mute hatred, drilled into me. The children, this time crying for real, from fright and not understanding the chaos happening, clung to their parents. When they finally headed for the exit, Henry turned for a final word. "This isn't over," he hissed, and his eyes held an unshakable confidence. The police waited until their car disappeared around the corner. The senior officer handed me his card. "Change all the locks immediately," he advised, "and if they show up again, don't engage. Call us right away." I thanked him, and closing the door, felt for the first time that day a trembling from the stress I had endured spread through my body. The next morning, the first thing I did was call a locksmith and replace every lock in the house. After the police incident, the pressure intensified. My mother called my workplace. She asked directly to be connected to my boss and, sobbing into the phone, began telling him how I had abandoned my family, left her in despair. She hinted that I was unstable, that I needed psychiatric help, and begged him to somehow influence the situation. The boss called me into his office. "Kate, is everything okay at home? Your mother called," he began with concern. I had to explain the whole situation to him, the years of discrimination, the attempted break-in, the ongoing harassment. He listened attentively, nodded, and finally advised me to take some time off if needed, and assured me he would block any further calls from my relatives to work. Meanwhile, Madison launched another campaign on social media. This time, she published a lengthy, pathos-filled post about how I had set the police on innocent children, how I had traumatized their psyches, painting me as a monster who put things above family. People who didn't know the background readily picked up this version, showering me with angry comments. "How could you do that to children? Family should come first. Some people are just heartless." Henry began stalking me. He showed up at my supermarket, at the coffee shop near the office, even at the gym. He would block my path and demand that I come to my senses. "You owe us," he stated once, blocking my car with his in the parking lot. "Mom and Dad gave you everything, and this is how you repay them? They charged me rent from the age of 18, while you lived for years on their dime. They paid for your education while I worked 2 jobs, I retorted. "Get out of the way." In the end, I hired a lawyer. Her name was Sarah, and she specialized in harassment cases. I provided her with all my meticulously collected documentation, screenshots of conversations, printouts of calls, photos of the aftermath of their visits, a copy of the police report. "This is classic harassment," she concluded, reviewing the files. "I will prepare official cease and desist letters for your parents and brother." The letters were sent out the following week. They were strict legal documents ordering the immediate cessation of all forms of communication, calls, visits, social media posts. In parallel, I continued to document every message, every post, every incident, creating a detailed chronicle of everything that had happened to me since buying the house. Then I made the final decision that had been maturing in me all these weeks of silent resistance. I formulated and published a lengthy post on social media, in which I consciously avoided direct names, but with ruthless clarity, devoid of emotional evaluations, laid out the entire chronology of what had happened. I described the years-long path to my dream, the purchase of a house, made possible only by years of ascetic savings. I talked about the shocking expectation of my relatives that I would provide my personal space as a free hotel. And finally, about the campaign of bullying launched against me following my refusal, culminating in the illegal break-in into my house using keys obtained by deception. The backlash was instantaneous and unexpectedly powerful. A wave of support picked me up. Friends, colleagues, even strangers wrote words of encouragement, asserting that I had every right to my home and personal boundaries, and that what was happening to me was sheer madness. Even some distant relatives, cousins I hadn't heard from in years, reached out in private messages, apologizing for initially believing my parents' distorted version. "We just didn't know the whole truth," one of them admitted. "Sorry for judging you without understanding." A few weeks later, an official letter arrived in my name from a lawyer representing Henry and Madison. It contained vague threats to sue me for disclosing personal information, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I immediately contacted Sarah.
Don't worry, her voice sounded calm and confident. They have absolutely no legal grounds for a lawsuit. In your post, you didn't name anyone. You merely stated facts that you can documentally confirm. And their claim of emotional distress is downright laughable against the backdrop of them systematically harassing you. It's a classic intimidation tactic. She drafted a comprehensive response that detailed the legal untenability of their claims, attaching copies of all my meticulously collected documentation, eloquently illustrating the pattern of their harassment. We heard nothing more from their lawyer. I seriously considered filing a counterclaim. I had a whole arsenal of irrefutable evidence: illegal entry, harassment, stalking. Sarah assured me we had a high chance of winning, but after brief reflection, I decided not to. I didn't want to spend even more emotional strength, time, and energy on this destructive litigation. I realized that my main goal was to move on, not to continue a legal war. The sought-after lull finally arrived. The legal cease and desist letters had an effect. The calls stopped, the messages disappeared, the poisonous posts on social media were erased. The established silence was solid, final. The subsequent months I devoted entirely to myself, my home, my career, and my garden. I replanted all the flowers that had been mercilessly trampled by Henry's children and set up a cozy reading nook in the living room with a deep armchair and the soft light of a table lamp, gradually turning these walls into my true, untainted refuge. My phone was silent. No family calls, no attempts to manipulate guilt, no demands, just blessed, enveloping calm. I didn't miss them. At first, this realization surprised me itself. I expected to miss my family, those bonds that I had always been told were unbreakable. But how can you miss people who always treated you as second-rate, who saw in you not a person deserving of love, but merely a resource meant for exploitation? My thoughts returned to those many years lined up in a clear line of grievances. Secondhand clothes versus the latest gaming consoles. The monthly rent I paid while Henry lived in our parents' house on their dime. My instant noodles while he regularly received generous care packages. And that ill-fated dinner at a cheap restaurant where my career achievement was ignored in favor of discussing his modest successes. They had shown me their true faces, and it was not the face of a family. Now I sit in my cozy reading nook with a cup of hot coffee in my hands and watch my garden through the window. The flowers I replanted have bloomed profusely, their bright, lush colors vibrant against the greenery, showing health and strength. I am aware that this story is probably not over yet. People like my relatives rarely give up so easily. Perhaps someday they will make a new attempt, devise more sophisticated ways to make me feel guilty or present new demands. But now I am ready for anything. I have a thick folder with documentary evidence, a competent lawyer, boundaries built and fortified with steel that I will allow no one to cross. And there is something much more important: my own self-respect, gained in this struggle, and a deep, unshakable knowledge that I deserve much more than the miserable role they had assigned me all my life.